Hey everybody, this week's Torah portion is Parshas Vayeitzei, and in this week's Torah portion, we find our forefather Jacob, Yaakov, meeting his soon-to-be, hopefully, wife, Rachel, and they meet and they have a very beautiful meeting together, and they decide they want to get married. And so Yaakov comes to her father, Lavan, and says, I would love to marry your daughter. And Lavan says, sure, no problem. There's just one little condition. If you want to marry Rachel, you're going to have to work 7 years for me. If you work 7 years, I'll let you marry her. So Yaakov says, okay, deal. And he works 7 years, and at the end of 7 years, he's getting married to marry Rachel. He comes to the wedding expecting to marry her. And lo and behold, he's conned. His father-in-law, not surprisingly, decides to switch the bride, and he ends up marrying Leah instead of Rachel. Now he doesn't know that till the next morning, and when he wakes up, he finds out he was been tricked. He's now married to Leah. So he's obviously very upset, and he goes back to his father-in-law and he says to him, "Hey, what's going on? We had a deal." And his father-in-law makes up an excuse and says, "You know what? I'll tell you what. You're already married to Leah. Work another 7 years, and I'll let you marry Rachel." And in fact, being the generous person that I am, I'll even let you take Rachel now as a wife, as long as you agree to work another 7 years. So now, instead of having to work for her and get her at the end, you'll get her right now, but you still have to work 7 years for her. So that will be a total of 14 years worth of work. And Yaakov says, fine. And he marries Rachel, and then he proceeds to work another 7 years for her. Now, the thing that always bothered me was, it would be 100% legal for Yaakov, after marrying Rachel, to say, you know what? Listen, we had a deal. I kept my end of the deal. I worked 7 years. So now that I have Rachel, a little taste your own medicine, father-in-law, but I'll be leaving now with my wives. Why did he work an additional 7 years when he already had Rachel? At this point, he could have just walked out and said, you know, I kept my end of the deal. You decided to cheat me, so a little taste of your own medicine, enjoy. Why stay and work another 7 years? There's no legal requirement when the person backstabs you like that. And I saw a very beautiful answer to this question once, and it points to a very important sensitivity that Yaakov had to his spouse. Yaakov was afraid of the following. If I worked for 14 years, meaning I worked for 7 years, married Leah, then got Rachel, then worked another 7 years, Leah's going to think that for me, she's worth 7 years worth of work, just like Rachel is. Hence, I worked 14 years for 2 wives. But if she sees that at the end of 7 years of work, and then marrying her, and then getting Rachel, I decide not to work another 7 years, it's going to become obvious that the first 7 years were really being worked for Rachel. And Leah's going to think to herself, so Yaakov, my husband, thinks that my sister is worth 7 years worth of work, but not me. And in order to prevent his wife from being hurt, or maybe being hurt, he said, it's better for me to work 7 years than potentially cause pain to my wife. Because if I don't work, she may think that she's not worth that many years of work for me to do. So therefore, in order to prevent his wife from having any little slight feeling of pain, he felt it was worth 7 years of his life to work for a con man, his father-in-law, in order just to prevent her from feeling that little drop of pain. What a big lesson this is to us, to be careful not to cause pain to other people. Even a slight degree of pain was worth 7 years worth of work to Yaakov, all the more so larger degrees of pain towards other people. On behalf of Makarave, Shabbat Shalom.